Hello everyone. Today, Chloe, Nam, Pim, and Pear are going to present you about the North Korea in both democratic and foreign affairs. First of all, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea or the PRK, more commonly known as the North Korea, has been one of the world's most secretive countries. Its government doesn't like people from outside the country going there and finding out what's going on. It shares a border with a country called South Korea, so that the two countries have not gone on with each other for a long time. A North Korean leader had not stepped foot in South Korea for 65 years. However, it changed in the April of 2018 when the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met the president of the South Korea Moon Jae-in at the border between two countries. The meeting was a significant moment in the modern history. So, in order to better understand the North Korea today in terms of democratic and foreign policy, we need to look back over the last few decades at the history and the information in this following.
Let's begin with the general information about North Korea. North Korea was formally created on the 9th of September 1948 at the end of the World War II, along with another country called South Korea. The political difference between the two rival states led to the outbreak of a horrific war in 1950, which lasted for 3 years. Since then, North Korea and South Korea have been enemies. For Korea, at the end of the World War II, it brought the liberations of Japanese colonial rules and division across the 38th parallel between the North and the South. The rival states soon formed with the support of Soviet Union in the North and United States in the South. The North Korea political system and style find their origin both in the indigenous political culture and external influence. The most important political force utilized by Kim Il-sung, which is to create a communist state. In that way, the communist revolution in North Korea was unique because they are different from other communist countries. It was not initiated by native elements. The North Korean regime is in inevitable competition with the South Korean government in every conceivable way. It is competition that has threatened the stability of both countries. Therefore, the political climate in North Korea is very unstable, especially in light of the recent events such as the nationwide famine. Moving on to the geographic position of North Korea. North Korea had a great influence upon its history and present difficulties. Korea formed a strategic center of East Asia on the northern half of the Korean Peninsula, with China on one side, Russia on another side, and Japan on a third. Because of this fact, both the cross currents of East Asia civilizations and the ambitions of Korean neighbors have flowed through Korea. North Korea shares border with three countries: China along the Amnok River, Russia along the Tumen River, and South Korea along the Korea Demilitarized Zones. The Yellow Sea and the Korean Bay are off the west coast, and the Sea of Japan is off the east coast. Most of North Korea is a series of medium-sized to large-sized mountain ranges and large hills, separated by deep and narrow valleys. The highest peak, Paktusan or Baekdusan, which is on the volcanic Baekdu Mountain, which is located on its northern border with China and rises 9,002 feet or 2,744 meters. And the North Korea's longest river is the Yalu or Yulu. Another large river includes Tumen, Daejeon, and Imjin. However, North Korea occupies territories north of the military demarcation line, as specified by the Ceasefire Agreement of July 1953 at the end of the Korean War. According to the South Korea Constitution, which states that the nation's territories include the whole of the peninsula and surrounding islands, North Korea territories legally belong to the South Korea, but being ruled by North Korea. Next is the past and present of the North Korea. For the past, while the peninsula is split into North Korea and South Korea, despite being unified off and on for nearly 1,500 years, the Korean peninsula was divided into North and South as a result of the breakup of Japanese Empire at the end of the World War II. The precise locations of divisions at the 38th parallel latitude was chosen by lower-level U.S. diplomatic personnel. At the end of the Korean War, the 38th parallel became a demilitarized zone in Korea, an armed and electrifying barrier to traffic between the two countries. The unification efforts have been discussed many times since 1945, but they are seemingly blocked by deep ideological and cultural differences developed since that time. The Korean War has begun in 1950 until 1953. At the end of the World War II, Korea was free from Japanese control. North Korea was occupied by the Soviets, while the South was occupied by American forces. By 1948, the countries were divided in half at the 38th parallel. Capitalist South by Syngman Rhee and the South Kim Il-sung. The Soviet troops withdrew from Korea in 1948, and U.S. troops withdrew in 1949. However, North and South Korea as enemies of one another would not accept the border between them as a permanent. North Korea attacked South Korea on June 25, 1950, across 38th parallel. Around 75,000 troops of the North Korea's People's Army defeated the Republic of Korea's army with success, capturing capital city of Seoul, then occupied the whole of South Korea except for Busan. This was a problem, as President Truman and the U.S. wanted to contain the spread of communism by preventing the domino effects. South Korea appealed for support, and the U.S. pushed a resolution to the United Nations Security Council. Also, the USSR did not use its veto power, as it was boycotting the council, because the new communist China was not accepted. In China's seat was the pro-US Chinese Nationalist Government of Taiwan. An appeal was made by Security Council for North Korea to withdraw its troops, but it was ignored. As a result, approval was granted for UN Army made of international force of 16 nations to send help to South Korea, commanded by General MacArthur. The UN troops, composed mainly of Americans, landed in South Korea in early July, but were soon pushed back on defense by the North Korea force, forming a perimeter around Busan to defend the line until reinforcements arrived in August. Now that their position was strengthened, MacArthur went on offensive. On September 15, the U.S. Marine Corps launched. The North Korea troops were pushed back on the retreat over the 30th parallel, and soon Seoul was recaptured along with the whole of South Korea by the end of the month. Now MacArthur was to go beyond the initial idea of containment. Truman worried of a Chinese response, nevertheless approved, and UN troops moved into North Korea on October 7, 1950, and on October 12, they captured Pyongyang, the North Korea capital, then the Yalu River, which was the border with China. China retaliated by helping the North Koreans, sending 250,000 Chinese troops. The UN troops was overwhelmed by these new forces, and then were pushed out of North Korea with heavy losses. By January 1951, Chinese and North Korea troops had captured Seoul. General MacArthur wanted to use the atomic bomb on China, and it was dismissed for insubordination by President Truman, who went back to a policy of containment. In June 1951, more UN troops were sent to Korea, eventually driving the North Korea to the 30th parallel and stabilized the front. Now, Iceland set in, and in July, peace talks began, but compromise could not be found. Meanwhile, fighting continued as American pilots fought in the air against Soviet pilots by using Chinese jet fighters and wearing Chinese uniforms. General Dwight D. Eisenhower took over as president in early 1953 and sought an end to the war. After 2 years of negotiations, an armistice was signed on July 1953 at the 30th parallel, and the demilitarized zone was set up which stands to this day. The impact of the 30th parallel. At the end of the war, Koreans were united in joint and hoped that they were going to be a single independent country. The establishment of the division, made without their input, let alone their consent, eventually dashed those hopes. Further, the location of the 30th parallel was in a bad place, clipping the economy on both sides. Most heavy industrial and electoral resources were concentrated north of the line, and most light industrial and agricultural resources were to the south. Both north and south had to recover, but they would do so under different political structures. Meanwhile, in North Korea, the Soviets appointed Kim Il-sung, who had served during the war as a major in Soviet Red Army, as the new leader of their occupation zone. He officially took office on September 9, 1948. Kim began to crush political opposition, particularly capitalists, and also began to construct his core personality. By 1949, statues of Kim Il-sung were springing up all over North Korea, and he had dubbed himself as Great Leader.
The result of great power rivalry, socialist and democratic in 1948. By 1948, the result of the great power rivalry had been to institutionalize a Korean war between the North, which is socialist, and the South, democratic. The timing and method of the North Korean attack were dictated by the Japanese factor. By 1949, it was clear that the US intended to revive Japan as the key to the Cold War system in Asia, a move that raised the idea of the reintegration of the South into a Japanese sphere of influence, backed by the US. For Kim Il-sung, the war was a preemptive move designed to snatch the South for a new threat and allow a united Korea greater freedom of maneuver within the socialist bloc. He thought that South Korea would quickly collapse before the US would intervene. He gambled with the future of the country, and it proved to be costly. Even though the North Koreans took over 90% of the South in the summer of 1950, they were held at Pusan perimeter and threatened with utter defeat by General MacArthur's landing in Incheon. Kim Il-sung and North Korea were only saved by the contribution of the Chinese People Volunteers, and the fighting ended in a stalemate in July 1953. The Korean War was a disaster for North Korea. It became the most heavily bombed country in history. The major cities were leveled to the ground, and industry was shattered. Human losses were particularly traumatic. A plausible estimate is that at least 12%, and possibly as high as 15% of the population were killed during the war. Kim Il-sung was not held to account for the death and destruction visited on his country. Instead, he became a symbol of national resistance, using the bitter experience of war to consolidate his power. Because of this, North Koreans grew to hate Americans and American foreign policy. Kim Il-sung died in 1994, and his son Kim Jong-un took over from him and followed his father's path for leadership of North Korea. North Korea propaganda of the Kim regime. In order to examine the use of North Korean propaganda as a core tenet For regime survivability, it is necessary to establish a definition of propaganda and explore the current environment in North Korea, particularly the use of strict measures of social and information control, and how it reinforced the effectiveness of the propaganda. The country is known as the Hermit Kingdom and remains as enigma to the most American and the world. Foreigners have only a vague understanding of the history, daily life, and propaganda environment of the citizens of North Korea. This lack of knowledge further inhibits the ability to rationalize and explain the actions of the regime, both foreign and domestic. It is widely recognized that propaganda is used to influence people. It has been used during the World War I and by totalitarian regimes, and it is well known and often referenced. There are three principles of propaganda. The first thing is the idea or opinion to be propagated must connect with something the target says already feels strongly about and use various methods in order to appeal broadly to those sentiments on multiple levels, which further shapes and develops positive attitudes. The second, the optimistic response to the idea or opinion is reinforced through manipulation, such as being mentioned frequently in the media and presented as news. The third, the propaganda is disguised and used as an explanation, and people believed it without feeling manipulated. So, we can see that in North Korea today, the Kim regime uses all three of these principles for its benefit and main goal to remain in power. At the present, every generation in North Korea has been indoctrinated with the same information that consistently reiterates the brilliance of the country, its people and leaders since the 1950s, and facts that are seemingly ridiculous and sometimes flat out wrong to outsiders are believed as truth inside the country. The absence of access to outside information reinforces this belief system because nothing is available to refute it. The social control measures in the country are extremely severe, if not the most extreme in the world, and the general public has little access to the information other than what they are told by the regime. This combination of intense propaganda and strict social control measures had enabled the Kim regime to endure, and the evolution of the President Kim Il-sung said is what we witness today. The next topic is life in North Korea today. The North Koreans live their life in a unique propaganda-defined environment, and it is unlikely to change in the near future. The lack of exposure has provided an unavoidable environment for mass influence and persuasion. The social control in the country are extremely severe. Since Reporters Without Borders began publishing the annual World Index of Press Freedom in 2002, North Korea has been ranked dead last almost every year. About the economy. Since the Kim's family has been ruling North Korea for long with his regime, economic as well as the other rule of law is totally under his control. The ruler and his members command all economic system and activities including companies and trade. There is no property rights, no functioning judiciary, the rules of law are weak, government is full of corruption and bribery, no transparency for the people. The government controlled centrally planned system for economy which include what and how much to produce for mostly all products. It could be said that almost the entire GDP comes from state-owned businesses. No business, labor, or monetary freedom. No trade, investment, financial freedom, and is restricted and minimal. Trade, investment, financial freedom are restricted and minimalized. Both international trade and inter-Korean trade, or trade between the North and South Korea, is also restricted and under governmental control. The UN sanctions affect the trade, and China is the only main trade partner for North Korea. The next topic is political overview. Others have described the DPRK political system as Stalinist, corporatist, mono-organizational, neo-traditional. Charles Armstrong, an American historian and the Korean Foundation professor of Korean Studies at Columbia University, correctly pointed out that the state has displayed all these characteristics and the state has transformed since it was founded in 1948. According to the state propaganda, the DPRK is dependent upon a great leader for survival and prosperity. North Koreans are indoctrinated to believe that freedom and national independence are only possible by submitting to and supporting the leader, even if it means sacrificing one's own life. The ideological pillars of the state promise that, in return, the leader will protect North Koreans from hostile international environment. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or Socialist Fatherland of Juche self-reliance ideology, was founded by the great leader Comrade Kim Il-sung. The DPRK has the political leadership system called Soyoung, or leader, or Kim Il-sung as the supreme socialist leader, even though it draws some influence from Leninism. The Juche ideology and Soyoung require its citizens unconditional and absolute obedience with Workers' Party of Korea, or the WPK guidance. The Socialist Constitution of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is the Kim Il-sung Constitution, legally embodies Comrade Kim Il-sung's Juche state construction ideology and achievements. North Korean political leadership: Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un. North Korea has been under the rule of the Kim family since 1948, when Kim Il-sung, on the left, became the country's first leader. He was succeeded by his son Kim Jong-il in the center in 1994. Kim Jong-un became the third member of the family to rule the repressive nation, taking over after his father's death in 2011. A little fun fact: people in North Korea usually call the leader comrade, being friend, ally, mate, colleague, or fellow socialist or communist. The term is inspired by French Revolution as a form of address between socialists and workers, and often associated with communism. The Socialist Constitution of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea stated that the DPRK and the entire Korean people must obey the only great leader comrade, or the Kims, as the eternal president of the republic, defends and carry forward his ideas, and exploits and complete the Juche revolution under the leadership of the Workers' Party of Korea. Comrade Kim Il-sung, as the revolutionary hero, even though with limited evidence, became the first leader of the great leader after fighting with Japanese occupation in 1948. Later, his power was raised by being the Soviet Union's best buddy, which created a mixture of his cult personality and Stalinist ideology. Kim Il-sung also developed the immortal Juche idea, built up a solid basis of construction of a sovereign and independent state in the fields of politics, economy, culture, and military, and founded the DPRK until his death in 1994, when he was designated eternal president. He is said to have turned the whole society into one big, single-handedly united family. Kim Il-sung's oldest son, Kim Jong-il, was appointed General Secretary of the WPK in 1997, after being groomed for the leadership of some 2 decades. From 1994, Kim Jong-il was the DPRK's de facto leader, exercising executive power as chairman of the National Defense Commission, which is now the State Affairs Commission or SAC, as well as General Secretary of the WPK and the Supreme Commander of the People's Armed Forces. Moreover, Kim Jong-il, who almost never spoke in public, was internationally made fun of for his buff-and handle, platform shoes, and draggy jumpsuit. He died of heart problems in 2011, leaving the country to his relatively inexperienced third and youngest son. Kim Jong-un became the supreme leader of North Korea in 2011, succeeding his father Kim Jong-il. Kim Jong-un. Much of his early life is unknown to Western media, presumably born in North Korea. Kim is the son of Yo Young-hee, an opera singer, and Kim Jong-il, the dictatorial leader of the country until his death in 2011. Although Kim Jong-un implemented some economic and agricultural reforms, human rights violations and brutal suppression of opposition continued to be reported under his rule. He also continued the country's nuclear testing and development of missile technology in the face of international condemnation, though he announced intentions to be more cooperative in that area via historic meetings with South Korean President Moon Jae-in and the US President Donald Trump in 2018. When it comes to Kim's leadership, there's a lot to criticize, but North Korea leader Kim Jong-un has plenty to teach us about leadership today. There are 5 important lessons from the Supreme Leader. Lesson number 1. Don't annihilate your enemies. Strong leaders don't fear dissent because they've done the hard work to inspire genuine loyalty. Naturally, Kim had the execution conducted in front of the hundreds of onlookers. In all, Kim is thought to have executed over 70 dissenters since coming to power. Like many errant leaders, Kim sees an excessive show of force as a sign of strength that will teach people a lesson. Lesson number 2. Your people are not your pleasure squad. Great leaders believe that they are there to serve their people. Kim sees their position as having additional responsibility to serve those who follow them, to motivate them, and to help them achieve more than they ever thought possible. Lesson number 3. Don't fear those who might have something to teach you. Kim Jong-un has a habit of pushing people out who might have something to teach him, a behavior with good ideas, and send everyone who is entrapped by a heavily armed border packing. Lesson number 4. Don't alienate your allies. Great leaders know that they are only as good as their allies. They cultivate these relationships as one of their most valuable business assets. But Kim Jong-un's lack of consideration for its interests has been a major strain on relationship throughout his rule. Kim's provocating solo maneuvers, including widely publicized missile tests. So, the leaders who made major decisions without considering the input of their allies are tough to work. Lesson number 5, the last lesson. Know the difference between yielding power and having power. Kim Jong-un wants to tell Japan, "You are not the boss of me." True leaders are confident enough in their authority that there's no need to prove it. If you have to prove that you are the boss by going around showing everyone how powerful you are, you have got a big problem. To conclude about the democracy part, the current DPRK system is doomed to failure, but it could last for a considerable time. The international community could impose democracy through force, but that would require a very costly war that is politically untenable. Deterrence and containment are the primary policy instruments for dealing with Pyongyang for years or decades ahead. That means waiting for change to generate within, but the prospects are bleak.
To talk about the humanitarian situations, the DPRK faces regular natural disaster and has experienced humanitarian emergency, including food shortage. In 1995, record threat and fallout of the collapse of the communist box subsidized trading system caused severe food shortage, which some sources estimate resulted in up to 2 million. The DPRK citizens dying from starvation and hunger-related illness. The resources shortage and inadequate sanitation facilities have led to serious public health concerns, including the re-emergence of diseases such as tuberculosis and malaria. Existing health services are unable to tackle increasing health problems and the prevalence of acute malnutrition. A rapid food security assessment issued by the UN Food and Agriculture Organization in May 2019 suggests that the DPRK experienced its worst harvest in 10 years in 2018 and 19, leaving 10 million people suffering from severe food shortage. However, Kim Jong-un boasted in December 2019 that the country had enjoyed its best ever harvest. Food price has also been low. The DPRK was heavily reliant on international humanitarian assistance, but this has declined since 2008, when the United States suspended humanitarian aid in response to concern over the DPRK nuclear and the proliferation activities. Australia does not currently provide humanitarian assistance to the DPRK. Australia suspended bilateral development assistance to the DPRK in the late 2002 due to the concerns about the nuclear missile programs. Separately, Australia suspended payments to the WFP in October 2017 over concern that the operating environments for international organizations make it difficult to mitigate the risk of DPRK regimes diverting aid away from those in need. Between 1994 and 2016, Australia provided over $90 million in humanitarian assistance, the majority to the WFP with a focus on food and nutritional supplementations targeting vulnerable groups. To talk about the military and nuclear weapons. The Article 59 said that the missions to carry out the military first revolutionary line in order to protect the nerve center of the revolutions. Kim Jong-II, whose name was the Dear Reader, promoted the Song conspiracy of military first and devoted much of the country's scarce resources to the troops. Under his rule, the North Korea built the world's fifth largest military even as its people suffer. He also staged North Korea's first underground nuclear test in 2006 and 2009. It was under his leadership that President George W. Bush declared North Korea part of Axis of Evil, along with Iran and Saddam Hussein Iraq. Moreover, Kim Jong-un has pursued advance in his father's nuclear weapons program, while modeling his leadership on his revered grandfather Kim II-sung. It has been reported that the DPRK first began to pursue nuclear technology as early as 1956. The DPRK has completed 2 nuclear reactors, both located at the Yongbyon Nuclear Scientific Research Center. It has conducted 6 nuclear tests, the most recent on the 3rd of September 2017. Under the Kim Jong-un, the pace of nuclear and ballistic missile developments has increased drastically. He conducted 2 nuclear tests in 2016 and more than 40 ballistic missile launches throughout 2017 and 2019. In August 2017, the North Korea fired 2 missiles able to carry weapons over the northern Japan and broadcast into the sea. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe called the action a serious threat to his country. In November 2017, the Hwasong 15 missile was successfully tested a new type of missile that could lead to the whole of the U.S. It was described as the country's most powerful. In 2019, the DPRK launches the ballistic missile on 13 occasions from the 4th of May to 28 November, involving 74 short-range ballistic missiles and 1 medium-range underwater launched ballistic missile, the most in any year under Kim Jong-un leadership. Next, Kim Jong-un pursued a so-called Beijing policy, which essentially means a dual focus on developing the economy and maintaining a nuclear weapons program that the country claims is for self-defense despite its threats to the turn of South Korea and the U.S. into sea of fire. Since then, the DPRK international relations declined, in particular due to its ongoing illegal development of nuclear and ballistic missile capability. The social conditions and human rights. To talk about the human rights violations in the DPRK. The violations extend to the systematic daily denial of basic freedoms, including freedom of expressions, religions and associations, which is extensive torture, public executions, collective punishment, and the extensive use of forced labor camp with oppressive conditions. Next, the DPRK government subjects its citizens to a pervasive program of instructions and close observations. Radio and television, it restricts to government broadcasts. Access to foreign media carry heavy penalty. Internet access is strictly prohibited. Other people do have access to a government-controlled internet. A travel pass is required for any movement outside one hometown. The permissions is required in order to enter or reside in Pyongyang. Tourism by North Korea, even to other communist countries, and among the elite is also non-existent. The tourism by foreigners to the DPRK is permitted, although strictly sticks to state-controlled official tour. The citizens of the North Korea do not receive any foreign newspaper, televisions, or radio broadcasts, and rarely meet foreigner-made comparisons to the Cold War era of the information controlled by Soviets and Eastern Europe, arguing that the citizens has more information available about life outside their own country than North Korean citizens have today. To talk about the right of women in the North Korea, they are suffer a length of sexual and gender-based abuses, in addition to facing violations of their rights common to the list of populations. These include rape and other sexual violence and torture in detention facilities and sexual exploitations or the forced marriage of North Korean women in China, and sexual gender-based violence and discriminations. The gender-based discriminations begins at the childhood, where school favor boys and men in leadership roles, and girls are socialized to uphold stereotypes, and women face greater difficulty than men in being admitted to the university, and in joining the military and the ruling WPK, which serve as the gateway to any positions of power. State authority perpetrate abuse against women, and they systematically failed to offer any protections or justice to women and girls facing sexual abuse. Next, the North Korea also discriminate against individuals and their family on political grounds in key areas such as employment, residence, and school by applying Songbun, a socio-political classification system that forms in creations group of people into loyal or hostile classes. However, pervasive corruption among officials enabled some room to maneuver around the structure of the Songbun system, with government officials accepting briefs to grant the permissions permit market activities and allow the travel domestically or abroad. The forced labor. The government used the forced labor from ordinary citizens, including children, to control its people and sustain its economy. A significant majority of North Korea must perform unpaid labor at some point in their life. Ordinary North Korean workers are not free to choose their own job. The government assigns jobs to both men and unmarried women from city and rural areas. In many cases, these enterprises do not compensate them, forcing them to find other jobs to survive and pay briefs to be absent at their assigned workplace. Failing to show up for work without permissions in the camp punishable by 3 to 6 months in forced labor training camps. Former North Korean students told Human Rights Watch their school forced them to work for free on farms twice a year for 1 month at a time. Some sources report that their school forced students aged between 10 and 16 to work every day to generate funds to pay teachers and school administrations to maintain school facilities and carry out government campaigns. The government also compelled many North Koreans to join paramilitary forced labor brigades. These brigades are controlled and operated by the ruling party and work primarily on building and infrastructure projects. Prisoners in political prisons is ordinary prison camps and short-term detention facilities also face back-breaking forced labor in dangerous conditions, sometimes in winter weather without proper clothing. The border tightening. Kim Jong-un government bolstered efforts to prevent people from leaving the North Korea without permissions by increasing the number of bodyguards, CCTV camera, and barbed wire fence on its border with China. Other tactics including jamming China mobile phone service at the border and targeting for arrest those communicating with people outside the country. The Ministry of People Security considered defections to be a crime of treachery against the nations. Hard punishment applied to North Korea forcibly returned by China. The severity of punishment depends on authority assessment of what returnee did while in China. The North Korean courts working or living in China are sent to long-term ordinary prisons or short-term detention facility. Those discovered trying to reach South Korea are treated more harshly and may be sent to the North Korea wholly fixed political prison camp system, where prisoners face torture, sexual violence, forced labor, and other inhuman treatment. Next, the North Korea fleeing into China should be protected as refugees place because of certainty of punishment in return. China failed to meet its obligations to protect refugees as a state party to 1951 Refugee Conventions and 1967 Protocol. Beijing denied permissions to the staff of the UN refugee agencies to travel to border areas where North Korea are present. In March 2013, the UN Human Rights Council mandates a commission of inquiry into human rights in the DPRK. The commission, chaired by former Australia High Court Justice Michael Kirby, released its report 17 February 2014. The report gives a detailed account of widespread and systematic human rights violations and contains a number of recommendations for DPRK, other states, and the international community. The inquiry concluded that in many contexts, The violations of human rights found by the Commission constitute crime against humanity. Australia urges the DPRK to adopt the recommendations of this report and to cooperate with efforts to hold to account those responsible for grave human rights violations. Australia has joined the international community in continuing to press the DPRK government to engage with the UN human rights mechanisms, including during our term on the UN Human Rights Council from 2018 to 2020. The UN Security Council considered the situation in the DPRK and reviewed human rights issues on 23 March in 2019. The UN Human Rights Council adopted the resolution emphasizing the need to develop mechanisms to ensure that DPRK officials responsible for crimes against humanity are held to account.
난 지금 북한에 와 있다.
어디 다친 데는 없어?
리정혁 씨는 참 좋은 사람이야. 갑자기 그런 생각이 들어요. 난 리정혁 씨가 행복했으면 좋겠어.
The Crash Landing on You is the South Korea series that reflects the individual property rights are severely and restricts to the North Korean citizens today. It is a K-drama romance that shows the most realistic North Korea picture. It tells the story between the South Korean woman and North Korean army, but has been widely praised for its well-researched and portrayal of North Korea. In order to make the drama as real as possible, the team conducts detailed interviews with North Korean defectors, ranging from soldiers to wives of military officers, merchants, divers, doctors, and even pianists who have studied overseas. So, in this series, they also loved in a defector as one of their writers and got an expert in North Korean language to review their script. Miss Kang, who was defector in 2015, revealed that this series showed the difference between North and South Korea clearly. It explained the Southern and North Korean accent and the appearance. The series showed the everyday life of North Korean people in a small village, where breakout and house check happened regularly, which Miss Kang revealed that she once had to hide inside a furnace at the house of the broker who helped her to escape to avoid detection. In Dharma, show when the heiress had to hide in the kimchi storage area when security force came knocking one night. Second, a depict in the Dharma, North Korea are allowed to choose only from a fixed list of hairstyles, 18 for women and 28 for men. From the interview of Miss Kang said, there are punishment for you if you don't combine. Third, another realistic scene that electricity is very unstable in the North Korea because government own everything in the country, so that the train in the North Korea stop very often. In fact, she said when she first arrived in the South Korea, she was so surprised that the train came on time. And last, throughout the series, there are depictions of life in the North Korea that could be made incredible because North Korea is the only place that the Interpol cannot reach. As we can see in the series, we can be conclude that the Crash Landing on You series represents the most realistic North Korean living today. The individual property rights are severely restricted, as the State Article 21 said that there shall be no limits to the property which the state can own and all natural resources of the country, railway, air transportations, telecommunications, and postal organs, as well as major factories, enterprise, port, and bank shall be owned solely.
The Constitution stated that the great leader comrade Kim Il-sung made clear the fundamental idea of the Republic's external policy, expanded and developed diplomatic relations on this basis, and heightened the international prestige of the Republic. We can see the relationship between North and South Korea today through the Sunshine Policy. After the administration under two previous presidents, saw a reduction in inter-Korean cooperation. The policy was established under President Kim Dae-jung. It is aimed to secure regional peace and stability, and build a firm reconciliation with the North and the reunification that every Korean is hoping for. This period saw increased trade, humanitarian aid, tourism, and family reunions between the two countries. Currently, Moon Jae-in administration that started in May 2017 also favors negotiation and engagement with the DPRK wherever possible. The year 2018 was considered to be the most significant year for inter-Korean relations. The ROK of the South and the DPRK reopened direct communication after almost 2 years, with a meeting in Panmunjom on January 9, 2018. Moreover, Kim Yong-nam, the DPRK's head of state at that time, led a delegation accompanied by Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, known as North Korea's propaganda princess, to attend the opening of the Winter Olympics, hosted by South Korea in Pyeongchang.
With another 280 North Koreans crossing the border, soon all eyes will be on one member of the delegation. Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, will become the first member of the Kim ruling family to set foot in the country. Vice President Mike Pence is also coming to the games, warning the U.S. will roll out the toughest, most aggressive sanctions ever against North Korea.
We will not allow North Korean propaganda to hijack the message and imagery of the Olympic Games.
But North Korea's imagery is already here, the flag flying in the athletes' village and draped on the side of this building.
Olympians from both Koreas marched under one flag. It was a good sign. Later, Kim Jong-un met with ROK President Moon Jae-in on April 27, 2018, in an historic inter-Korean summit. They held 2 other summits that year. Outcomes of the summit included the Panmunjom Declaration, the Pyongyang Joint Declaration, and the Comprehensive Military Agreement. Since the third inter-Korean summit in September 2018, both nations still haven't engaged with each other. The relationship between the United States. The most recent bumpy relationship between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump started with North Korea's nuclear testing, the Hwasong-15 missile, as I mentioned before. Even the new commander of the U.S. Forces Korea, General Vincent Brooks, recently suggested that Kim is more dangerous than his father. General Brooks said Kim has led to a more aggressive and unpredictable North Korea. U.S. President Donald Trump had to send warships and submarines to South Korea, a country where America has supported for a long time, to try to get Kim Jong-un to stop his weapon-building plans. In other words, a military message warning that if Kim bombed the U.S. with his nuclear, our troops are ready to bury you. At the start of 2018, Mr. Kim ended up in another war of nerves with President Trump. Mr. Kim made his New Year address saying he always has his nuclear launch button on his desk, and Mr. President responded by saying that his button was bigger and the weapons he had were bigger and more powerful. There have been many arguments between the US and North Korea in the past, and although they've never been friends, they have never got as far as war, because the two countries hated each other so much that their leaders never met before. Many people thought the relationship was getting better when the two leaders announced the face-to-face meeting. It was a moment of world history when Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un finally met on June 12, 2018 in Singapore.
Well, this morning, North Korean state media has just debuted some new footage that was shot during the Trump-Kim summit in Singapore. Take a look at this. Okay, so the president extends his hand to this North Korean general. The general responds with a salute. The president returns the salute, and then both men shake hands. Why is this significant? Our military analyst, former Rear Admiral John Kirby, is back with me. Why is this so?
Both arrived in Seoul. Trump was with his private Air Force One, and Kim came along with his jogging bodyguards.
Woo! Oh, there you go. Look at that. Oh, all the presidents, man. Look at that. Look at them jogging, man. So cool. Woo! Look at that. Oh my God. Shit.
They started with a handshake, and there were just two translators in the room with them. After the two leaders spent around 40 minutes discussing some of the issues between the two countries, they invited all their advisors to join them for lunch. The two countries then agreed to a statement about what they wanted to do to improve their relationships. Afterwards, as they both signed the joint statement in front of the members of the media, President Trump said, "We are going to take care of a very big and dangerous problem for the world. For me, it worked it out for both of us far better than anybody could have expected," Kim Jong-un added. The world will see a historic change. The second historical moment happened at the end of June 2019. The two leaders walked across the 38th parallel, a line separating North and South Korea, where they shook hands. Then they walked back to South Korea. It made him the first U.S. president to visit North Korea. They planned to meet only for a short time, but ended up speaking with each other for about an hour and agreed to talk about denuclearization or no nuke deal. Again, this time, Mr. Kim said their meeting was a symbol of their excellent friendship, and Mr. Trump said it was a great day for the world. According to the UN Security Council resolutions, the DPRK nuclear and missile programs violate a number of commitments and agreements made by the DPRK. Acting under Chapter 7, Article 41 of the UN Charter does not authorize the use of force. It is formal obligation that the flag state shall direct the vessel to proceed to an appropriate and convenient port for the required inspection, meaning that if North Korea transports most prohibited materials under its own flag, the provision could provide additional incentives to do so. The UN Security Council agreed on greatly expanded sanctions against the DPRK. Many countries downgraded their diplomatic relations or cooperate with the DPRK. However, a number of countries still maintain diplomatic representation in Pyongyang or host DPRK embassies. The DPRK's continued commitment to its nuclear and missile program has put a severe strain on many of its international relations. These are the lists of commitments that DPRK had failed. Firstly, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty as a non-nuclear weapon state 1985 and declared its withdrawal in 2003. Secondly, the Joint Declaration for a Non-Nuclear Korean Peninsula. Thirdly, the agreed framework between US and North Korea aimed at ending the DPRK's nuclear weapons program. Fourthly, the six-party talks between the North and the South Korea, China, the United States, Japan, and Russia. Lastly, the DPRK violated the Leave Day agreement that was made between the US and the DPRK in 2012. So what's the best way to stop Kim? Maybe as the UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric said, diplomatic engagement is the only pathway to sustainable peace. China's support for North Korea dates back to the Korean War, when its troops flooded in the Korean peninsula to support its northern ally. Continuously, China has been lending political and economic aid to North Korea's leaders, Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un. North Korea has faced many famines throughout its history. Internationals such as China, Japan, South Korea, and the US primarily aid them in food and energy assistance. More than 75% of food aid to North Korea since 1995. China can also be considered as North Korea's trade BFF or best friend, and it has the most influence over Kim Jong-un regime. Still, items such as pho, seafood, silkworms, and cell phones are imported in North Korea through China's border. Beijing has opposed harsh international sanctions on North Korea to avoid regime collapse and the refugee flowing in from its neighbor. Although Beijing appears to criticize its friend on nuclear development, some analysts say that its policy is still focused on stability. In the aspect of military and nuclear developments between the two nations, Pyongyang's nuclear tests and missile launches have complicated its relationship between Beijing, the broken of six-party talks. A purge of top North Korea officials since Kim came to power also raised concern from China about the stability and direction of North Korea leadership. Yet North Korea's recent diplomatic purge with the United States and South Korea appears to have paved the way for a reunion between Kim and China's Xi Jinping. Relationship with Thailand. With the latest development in U.S.-North Korea relations and improving inter-Korean ties, opportunities are open for Thailand as well as ASEAN to play a facilitating role on the Korean peninsula. Thailand and North Korea first established diplomatic relations on 8 May 1975. Their relations and cooperation have developed with ups and downs, depending on the general regional and global security environment. Pyongyang was the first communist country that recognized Thailand in order to end international isolation and balance South Korea's influence in Southeast Asia. Some bumpy relations appeared between the 1980s and the 2000s, after the failed attempt by the North Korea embassy in Bangkok to kidnap one of its staff members who planned to escape. The two nations' ties dropped. Since then, Bangkok has refused to consider Pyongyang's request for additional diplomats to its mission in Thailand. But recently, it seems like both nations are starting to develop greater relationships within Thai military junta government. Deputy Prime Minister Visanu Khreungam welcomed Moon Song-mo, ambassador from North Korea, to mark the 40th anniversary of Thailand's and North Korea's diplomatic relations on 7 January 2015. North Korea proposed stronger economic cooperation between the nations and suggested Thailand opens an embassy in Pyongyang to benefit future Thai investors in North Korea and cultural exchange. Visanu also thanked North Korea for understanding Thailand's political situation and acknowledging the legitimacy of the junta government. Both foreign ministers also met in August 2015. North Korea Foreign Minister Ri Su-yong, on the left, shakes hands with his Thai counterpart Thanasak Patimapakon in Bangkok. The statement suggests that Ri believes the military-ruled Thailand would prioritize business ties and not be inclined to criticize North Korea's politics or human rights record, which is the worst in the world. In my opinion, it seems like they favor similar things. So, have you guys ever wondered how to escape from North Korea? There are many who succeed and fail. Our group decided to choose two of the most significant from the media spotlight, Yeon-mi Park and Hyo-sun Lee. The most famous, Yeon-mi Park.
North Korea is an unimaginable country. There is only one channel on TV. There is no internet. We aren't free to sing, say, wear, or think what we want. North Korea is the only country in the world that executes people for making unauthorized international phone calls. No books, no songs, no press, no movies about love stories. Every story was propaganda to brainwashes about the Kim dictators. When I was 9 years old, I saw my friend's mother publicly executed. Her crime? Watching a Hollywood movie. North Korean refugees, about 300,000, are vulnerable in China. 70% of North Korean and teenage girls are being victimized, sometimes sold for as little as $200. Death or dignity. Armed with knives, we were prepared to kill ourselves if we were going to be sent back to North Korea. We wanted to live as humans.
At the One Young World Summit in 2014 in Dublin, Yeonmi Park made her significant appearance and captured the heart of the people in the meeting. Some were sobbing. She told her story of how she escaped the DPRK when she was 13 years old, witnessed her mother being raped, and her father's public execution for illegal trading in North Korea. Park fled North Korea by crossing the partly frozen Yalu River into China, 2007. Park had to walk across the Gobi Desert by following the compass, and when it stopped working, they followed the Stars of Freedom. Along with the knives, they prepared to kill themselves if they were caught and sent back to North Korea. She says she had to witness her mother being raped by a Chinese broker, but she finally made it to Mongolia before reaching South Korea. She also described her horrible experience about how North Korea refugees were treated in China. She said, "A lot of Chinese people are taking advantage of our vulnerability, and that's how human trafficking is happening for the North Korean people. Myself and my mother were both victims of that." She ended her speech by suggesting 3 ways to help North Korea. First, educate ourselves so we can raise awareness about the human rights crisis in North Korea. Second, help North Korea refugees who try to escape. And the last one, stop China from repatriation. There were rumors spreading around on December 2015 accusing her as a liar from her disconnected story or pictures of her mom with Channel bag. She was basically rich in North Korea. But our group can't find any trustable resources to find out the truth, except the media that was supported the DPRK. So maybe the DPRK authorities might be the one who framed her as a liar, or she might have spoken the truth. It's up to you to decide. The next person is Hyun-Seo Lee.
One day in 1995, my mom brought home a letter from a Caucasus sister. It read, "When you read this, our 5 family members will not exist in this world because we haven't eaten for the past week." This was the first time I heard that people in my country were suffering.
Lee. As a child growing up in North Korea, Hyun-Seo Lee thought her country was the best place on the planet. It wasn't until the famine of the 90s that she began to wonder. She escaped the country at 14 and began her life by hiding as a refugee in China. She admitted that her family was not poor and they never had experienced hunger. The first time she recognized the suffering famine of North Korea was in 1995. A letter from her mother's co-worker sister saying, "We haven't eaten for the past 3 weeks and we are waiting to die." This happened when the Great Famine hit North Korea in the mid-1990s and killed millions of people. Many survived by eating grass, bugs, or tree bark. Unfortunately, she can't reveal many details about how she escaped North Korea. She was sent to China to live with distant relatives, thinking that it would take only a short time to reunite with her family, but it took her 14 years. She had to live in China with dangerous risk because the North Korean refugee is considered as an illegal refugee. She was also once caught by the police, but she revealed her great skill of Chinese. Many of the refugees were not as lucky as her. After 10 years of hiding her identity in China, she decided to take the risk of going to South Korea. The wide gap between the South and the North forced her to readjust her life, which was not easy, but she managed to take the university entrance exam. I personally was touched by her saying that there was no country I could proudly call my own. And once she started to settle down, the shocking phone call came. The North Korea authorities blocked her money that she sent to her family, and as a punishment, her family would be sent to a remote countryside in North Korea. Then she had to get them escape as soon as possible. She flew to the North Korea border in China and guided her family for their 2,000 miles journey through China to Southeast Asia. The journey by bus took 1 week, and they were almost caught several times. Since her family couldn't speak Chinese, Hyun-seo told the police that they are deaf and dumb people. Luckily, the police believed her. They made it all the way to the border of Laos, but she had to spend almost all of her money to bribe the Laos border guards. Still, her family was arrested several times. The miracle seems to be on her side when there was one stranger willingly to pay for her family to get them out of jail in Laos. Eventually, her family were finally united in South Korea after a long journey. The support of international community is what the North Korean needs. The stranger told her, "I'm not helping you. I'm helping North Korean people." Hyun-seo encourages the listeners that getting freedom is only half of their success, but to bring separated North Korean family starting a new life in a new country with zero start, education, English language learning, job training must be provided. Thank you for your all attention.